everybody. This is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. I hope you're all doing very well today. So in this video, I'm going to share with you guys some photographs that I took at the 2022 Shiner Show in Wilmington, Massachusetts. This is a vintage heavy show, so if you guys like vintage sports cards, you're definitely going to want to check out this show. It's been put on by the Greater Boston Sports Collectors Club since 1985, making it, I think, one of the oldest conventions, continuous conventions in the area. So I try not to miss any of these shows. I think I've only missed like three so far, not since 1985, but since I got out of high school, which is quite a number of years ago. In any event, let me show you some of these photos. All right, the first photo is the 1954 Topps Willie Mays, and I know this is really a fan favorite of a lot of collectors. It's not really my favorite set, but it has a really kind of an interesting story behind it. As legend goes, and because there's a lot of legends in the hobby, the 1954 top set was not a favorite of Joel Shorin, and when Cy Berger ended up designing the set, and I think Woody Gelman had his input on the set as well, they brought it to the president of Topps, Joel Shorin, who really didn't like this set. He didn't want it issued at all, and he didn't want it printed. And so Cy Berger really had to fight to have this set released and continued. So you guys can thank Berger for this one. Just looking at the price that the dealer has on it, 435 for a VG3. It's a SGC holder, and I think that's quite expensive actually. There's going to be, and I'm going to continue to say this throughout the video, and also I'm going to have another video too on this because this is going to be very long. However, what I'm kind of finding is that there is a disparity with two types of dealers. You have a lot of dealers who are older and more well established, and you have younger dealers who are just getting in. And when it comes to, I guess, vintage, there's a lot of pricing that really hasn't come down, which it probably should, because what I've noticed over the last 2 years or so, the pricing is very reflective of what's going on in the economy, and it's not really established with these dealers. They're not really paying attention to what's going on in the economy right now, and the prices that they're showing are not. I don't know how to say this, but they're not reflective of reality. This may be the same case here. I'm not sure, but in any event, Willie Mays is kind of an interesting personality right now. Unfortunately, his cards have gone up, and I don't think that it's uh, based on economics or anything like that or popularity. What I think it's based on is that there's a lot of dealers who are on Willie Mays' death watch. Unfortunately, this does happen within the hobby. If collectors or dealers know that there's a player who is going to enter the Field of Dreams, then they're going to raise the price of the card. Or if a player already has entered the Field of Dreams, that's what's going to happen. It always does. And in a way, it's kind of like a dead cat bounce in the economy. So I'm not a big fan of it whatsoever. But there are a lot of dealers and collectors who are waiting for Willie Mays to pass on, and they're jacking up the prices because of that. Now, in this particular case, though, right above it, you do have a 1958 Topps Mickey Mantle, and the seller wants 665 for it, and it's a very good, excellent. And the one thing about the 58 Topps is that these cards are really kind of notorious for a few things. One of those is a soft stock. I've also noticed too that there's a lot of like print bubbles and stuff associated with this set, and it does have its myriad of issues. But this is a interesting 58 Topps mantle. It's not one that I see often, although I do kind of like his 1958 probably a little bit better than the 57. And I'll actually show you one of those. The other card too here is you can just see it, and I don't really take great photographs, but The 1957 Topps Willie Mays. Uh, unfortunately, I didn't get a price on this, and I didn't take a great photo. However, you can see that there's a lot of snow on this particular card. It's a very good, excellent. And what snow is it's really kind of notorious for certain issues, like say the 1951 Bowman Jets, Rockets, and Spacemen, or the 1951 Bowman baseball and football. The thing about snow is that it's created when you have too much ink on the card and that ink lifts. And that's how I interpret it to be. And in the 57 set, you also have a lot of issues as well, a lot of print streaks in that set. The 57 top set is actually a really nice set. It is the first series that has standard measurements for cards going forward. So it is pretty historic. And I actually did a article on a specific part of the set, which you might not have ever thought about before, and is the flying A that you see in the background of a lot of cards. I think 22 cards to be exact. And so you guys can go over to my website and read that article. It's kind of interesting. I always wanted to know what that flying A was because I was not alive when the Flying A was around. All right, so here's a better example of that 57 Topps Willie Mays, and 475 is still kind of pushing it, I think, in terms of what is realistic. However, the top card here is a 58 Topps Mickey Mantle All-Star, and it's a near mint 7, and the dealer wants 645 for this particular card. Again, this is not a difficult card to come across, and that's a really expensive price, I think, even for a 58 Topps Mantle All-Star, because this actually is a triple printed card. The subset is really kind of notorious for a few things. It's got a lot of print streaks, a lot of print bubbles, and the focus on a lot of these cards can be off, or the register is what they call it. And I found that to be true even with the Mickey Mantle here, because it's almost a full body shot. These are actually really nice. And if you were just getting into collecting vintage baseball, I would actually go for the 58 Topps All-Star cards because they're normally a pretty cheap way to get Hall of Famers. And normally, I think the Mickey Mantle All-Star here is one of his cheapest because it is a triple printed card. I think that the normal price for this card should be roughly about 150. You might be able to grab one for maybe under $100. Traditionally, it's not a difficult card to find, so I would probably start out with this particular card if you're looking for a mantle. But that's just my personal opinion. This is also really kind of interesting too because you do have another one of these 58 Topps Mantle All Stars, and the gentleman here is asking 195 and a good, which is a PSA 2. I still think that may be a little on the expensive side. You have some other really interesting cards too. The 55 Topps Sandy Koufax. This is not a tough card to find. I see a lot of these cards. In fact, 925 may actually be in line for what it should go for. This is actually a very good, or a 3, a SGC 3. His rookie is not really my favorite card in this set. And then right next to it, you have the 63 Topps Pete Rose rookie. And again, it's not my favorite card. I hate to be kind of snobbish about this stuff, but I do like Pete Rose's 64 Topps standalone issue a lot better than this one. This card has always been pretty pricey, and it's a near mid 7 here, so I could probably understand the $600 price range. The card itself is really off center, and I see a lot of these cards that are off center. It's always a very popular card, and Pete Rose, despite being banned from the Hall of Fame, I think he's still very popular, even with all the shenanigans that have come out on him over the last couple of years too. It doesn't seem to sway people from collecting his cards, and just because he's the all-time hit king. I think if Pete Rose actually got in the Hall of Fame, he'd be just another Hall of Famer, and his cards would probably go down in price. That's just what I believe may happen. So he actually might be worth more banned than being in the Hall of Fame, if that makes sense. And then right on top of that is a 1955 Bowman Mickey Mantle, and it looks like the dealer wants $950 for this card in very good condition, or a PSA 3. This set is really kind of a historic set, if you will. There really was only, I think, one other or two other issues that I'm aware of that had a TV issue for its format in a card set. The 1950 Drakes and the 1950 Rams, the LA Rams. They had an Admiral TV series style set, and this set is really kind of notorious for chipping issues and centering issues as well. I did an article on the design itself a couple of months ago, I believe. It's really kind of interesting. I actually do kind of like the set. A lot of people don't, and there are a few cards in the set that are really kind of difficult to track down. And I know Ernie Banks in the set is pretty difficult, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. I don't think there are any kind of issues with Ernie Banks, particularly his contract. So I'm not sure why that card has always kind of been a short printed card, if you will. And then right next to that is a 1956 Topps Mickey Mantle, and I know there are two different versions of this card. There's a white background and like a gray background, right, or a tan background. And that kind of tells me that this card was printed more than once. I'm not sure exactly why that was, but this is Mickey Mantle's Triple Crown year, and it's actually a really great card. It's one of my favorites, in fact. And this card used to be a $400 card all day long until the pandemic, and then it just shot up in price. So he has almost $3,000 on this for an excellent, looks like or a six. Looks like maybe a five or a six here. And this card is now kind of really kind of getting very, very unaffordable for the average collector, which is really too bad. And then right above that is a 1968 Topps Rod Carew. And Rod Carew, for everything that he's done in baseball, he's so cheap. It's not even funny. He has some pretty nice early cards, and I think he stopped playing in 1985. So I never really got to see him play. However, his statistics are really impressive. Problem is with him is that he just doesn't sell, and it's really too bad because he's just a really fantastic ball player. And this happens to be one of my favorite cards in hockey. This is the 1953 Parkhurst Jean Beliveau rookie, and the Parkhursts are a great way to get into vintage hockey, especially the 1953 set, because there are so many Hall of Famers and it's fairly affordable. It's not going to break the bank. This card will break the bank, though. Unfortunately, it's a great card. The only problem I've kind of come across with the 53 and the 1954 Parkhurst that they have toning issues, and you can definitely see this around the edges and the borders of these cards. And I'll show you more photos of these as we go along, just to show you what I'm talking about. The other thing too is that these cards tend to bend pretty easily, which tells me that the stock isn't really suitable, and there are some problems with that. However, you can find these cards. They're not that difficult, and they would make a great starter for anyone who wants to get into vintage hockey. I highly recommend both of those sets. Oh, the other thing too about this card, I wouldn't purchase this card raw. I would purchase it in a graded example just because of the expense of the card alone and the fact that I think that there are a lot of either reprints or forgeries floating around. So I'm very kind of leery about a card like this just being in a raw example. Now, I do know the dealer quite well, and I've done business with him. And his name is Steve Campbell, and he's a great dealer to do business with. So that's the only reason why I probably would pick up a raw example from him because I do trust him as a dealer. So he's always been really decent to me. All right, this is another card of Steve's, and it's the Bobby Hull rookie. Again, this is a card that I normally wouldn't buy raw just because of the price tag associated, but it's a really, really nice design. I really, really enjoy this card. Bobby Hall does have some other really nice cards too. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Maybe it's the 59 is quite nice in the 1960. This has always been a quite an expensive card, and I don't really see it at shows all that often as I do for other cards. So again, the 58s are quite nice. I think the 58s also have the same problem as the 58 tops, and the fact that the centering on these cards can be quite bad, and the stock itself can be really poor. So you might want to keep that in mind as well. I'm not entirely familiar with specific problems with this set, except for the centering and the stock issues, any printing defects or whatever, I'm not entirely familiar with. All right, here's some really nice 1950s examples of Hall of Famers. You got a bunch of 1956 tops. The Ernie Banks is actually, I think, quite nice. I think it's actually nicer than the 55, and I'm not a fan of Ernie Banks rookie, but it is a card that if offered, I probably would accept adding it to my collection. I see a lot of his rookies, and they're usually in dog beat condition. And then right next to it up top is Harmon Killebrew's second year. For whatever reason, Killebrew doesn't have a 1957 tops card, and I think it's because he maybe didn't play that year, or he played so little that tops passed him up. But that is his second year card, and on top of it, Killebrew also has a 1955, not just his 55 tops rookie, but he's got a 55 double play as well. And that one I don't see all that often. Right next to that is the 57 tops football, and that looks like it is Paul Hornig. And this card, actually, I see this card quite often. It's also a set that I like only in near mint condition, because once you start getting into 57 tops that are really kind of off center, they are not very good looking cards. And that is a design that was actually a Bowman design for a baseball series that they were going to issue, except in 1956, in February, I believe, they sold the business to Topps for $200,000, which seems really cheap at the time, but I think it's actually something in the ballpark of over $2 million. The 1957 Topps it is a nice set if you can grab a bunch of them and just kind of display them. Other than that, I kind of try to leave them alone. And then you have the more 1956 Topps cards. The Roberto Clemente here really stands out, and this is a great image. It's one of my favorites, in fact, in the entire set. I like it a lot better than his rookie card. In fact, it is, I believe this image was actually taken in Ebbets Field, and it looks like the Jim Greengrass, which if you haven't seen that card, you can check it out. I didn't see one there, although I would show you the photo. But Jim Greengrass is actually going to catch a baseball, or has caught a baseball in front of this sign as well. I'm not entirely sure which sign this is in Ebbets Field. I think it's center field, if I'm not mistaken. But you guys could tell me what it is. It looks like an Esso gas station sign, but again, that's just a thought on my part. It is one of my favorite Clemente cards, and Clemente is just an amazing ball player all around. I know this card has actually gone up in price quite a bit when I bought it so many years ago. And then right next to that is Sandy Koufax second year card, and I just did a video on Sandy Koufax, so you guys can check that out. And then obviously Mickey Mantle and Ted Williams. Ted Williams to me is, I've written about him quite a bit. I don't think he's a guy that I would ever have a beer with. He just kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I knew his friends quite a bit: Dom DiMaggio, Johnny Pesci, Bobby Dorr. And they always spoke pretty highly of him, except maybe Bobby Dorr at some point in time. I think, I'm not sure who is real, John Wayne or Ted Williams. Did John Wayne steal his behavior from Ted Williams, or did Ted Williams become John Wayne? I'm not sure. I know he's a he's a war hero and he's a Hall of Famer, but he rubs me the wrong way, and I don't know. It's just certain things about the guy just kind of I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Anyway, right next to the Al Kaline is the 55 tops Gil Hodges, and I'm really happy that Gil Hodges got in the Hall of Fame. That's actually quite a nice card. And then you have Yogi Berra, and who doesn't like Yogi Berra? He's a national hero as far as I'm concerned, and he's someone I first learned about in history class in high school. So, and then there's the Roberto Clemente rookie card, and I could take it or leave it. Tell you the truth, it's not my favorite card. And then you obviously have the Harmon Killebrew rookie. And right next to that, you have the Duke Snider, which is the last card in the set, and that's actually a pretty nice Snyder. If you can't get a hold of that one, you can get a hold of his 1956. I think it's the same image. In fact, not the small one, but the large image. But that's a kind of a nice card. Let's see what else we got. This is actually a really pretty expensive card. It's Johnny Bower's rookie. I'm actually going to do a video on Johnny Bower, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it here in this video. But this is a 1954 Parkhurst, and as you can tell, it has some toning issues as well. I didn't realize how good of a ball player that or hockey player that Johnny Bower was, and I'll talk about him more in a different video. But this is a really great card. It is somewhat expensive though, just because I think Johnny Bower's cards are expensive to begin with. All right, just looking over this, this is pretty interesting here. The first card that kind of stands out to me is the 1948 Leaf Warren Spahn. I've had my opportunities to grab this card in the past, and I never did. Particularly because I already had a 48 Bowman Warren Spahn, and this one, while it is kind of nice, these cards actually have a lot of issues with them, and I think Saul Leaf, the owner of the Leaf Company or Leaf Corporation, was kind of a sketchy dude from everything I've heard. And I think a lot of that had to do with not wanting to pay taxes, and that actually could interfere with his sports cards. In fact, there's something about this set that is nice and it's ugly at the same time. And these cards are actually found a lot of times in just beat condition, just because I think the stock itself was kind of ratty. There's a lot of printing problems with this set. The lithography really doesn't like kind of add up, if you will. So a lot of the times you're gonna find that the registration is off, and I'm not sure if they were using stones. I kind of doubt it. More likely like printing plates, but again, I'm not entirely sure the printing process of this particular set was, and I'm not even sure who printed this set. Usually, the card manufacturers did not print their own cards, with the exception of a few. It could be that they actually did print their own cards. I know that Bowman contracted out to Zabel Brothers, and then Lord Baltimore as well, back in the 40s and 50s. And then on the bottom here, you can see a 1969 Topps Johnny Bench. This is actually his second year card, and I think it's actually quite nice. It's a lot nicer, I think, than his rookie card, although I do like his rookie card as well. The funny thing about Johnny Bench's 69 Topps here is that this card has seen quite a wavelength, if you will, of valuation, extreme valuations to more moderate. I can remember in the late 1980s and early 1990s, this was at one time a $350 to $400 card. And today, a lot of people would be like, why would you pay $350 for this particular card? And what would his rookie card have been then? And I can assure you that this was a very expensive card. And he also got into the Hall of Fame, and it jacked up his prices too. But we started to see a lot of these 69 Topps cards, especially the Nolan Ryan and the Reggie Jackson rookie. That Reggie Jackson rookie, which is shown here, that was at one point an $800 card plus, and it's really more moderate now. I also think that Reggie Jackson has another rookie card in another set too, and I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but I do remember seeing it. So this is not his only one. And then right next to it, below, is the 1948 Leaf Stan Musial. And this is a great card, but again, you can see that this is where I'm talking about with the set having a lot of flaws to it. And if you can find a decent copy, even centered, pick it up, or just try to negotiate for it. And then right next to that is the Jackie Robinson 54 Tops, and this is a really classic card. I see this card all the time. It's not difficult at all, but it is getting more expensive than it was before. I'm not sure if $1,000 for what looks like a very good, excellent PSA graded card is a good deal. I would not pay that for this card, but that's just me. And then right below the Stan Musial card is a 1933 Gaudi Moberg, and this is in beat condition. That I would put this thing in the fire, just burn it. But that's just me. Somebody's gonna like this card, but I don't think at 450 they're gonna like it that much. Moberg obviously worked for the OSS. It's the same organization my grandmother worked for during World War II. Although I think she worked mostly in the CBI theater, and he was with the European theater and working in a different location. The thing with the OSS is that they had at least 57 different groups working together, and so it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint which group was where. And even in my grandmother's case, she was posted in so many different places, either in CBI or sometimes in European theater. And I'm still trying to figure that one out. And during 2006, 2007, the government released all the names of the OSS agents, and my grandmother was on that list. So it's another story for a different time, but it's really kind of fascinating to see who was with the OSS then. There are a lot of names that we actually didn't know about. Moberg, obviously, he was a lawyer. He was a highly educated man. He was a college educated man, which is really unusual for ball players back in the 1920s when he came up. I don't think that he actually ever went into the CIA, although the OSS, they just transitioned their name over in 1947, I believe, to the CIA. He's got a really interesting story. They did a movie about him a couple of years ago with Paul Rudd. I like that movie, but there's an incident in there with Bobby Dorr, and Bobby Dorr is a really quiet guy. And I couldn't get more than maybe a couple of sentences out of him. Very nice guy, but I think the movie took liberties with the portrayal of Bobby Dorr, which I did not like. Again, I didn't know Moberg. I wasn't alive when he passed away. Again, I'm not sure exactly how true the movie was to the real life Moberg. Again, Paul Rudd is actually a really good actor, so and that's one of the reasons why I went to see the movie. Though I was a little disappointed with it, and I'm not a movie critic by any stretch of the imagination here. So, uh, you know, movies like literature and like art are very subjective. And then right below that, you see a 1953 Bowman Color Yogi Berra, and this is a fantastic card. Unfortunately, this one there's a huge crease going along it, but this is one of my favorite cards of Yogi Berra. And again, as I say, who doesn't like Yogi Berra? I don't know who the photographer was, but whoever it was, they did an outstanding job. And the 1953 Bowman color it has a fascinating history behind it. I've done a lot of research into this set, and Ted Kazandis, he's another researcher, a longtime researcher. I know he did a article on this particular set back in 1983 for Baseball Cards magazine. And again, here's a 1953 Parkhurst Gordie Howe, and this is probably a very cheap example of Gordie Howe's early cards. You can find this card. It's not that difficult to find. $400, you can negotiate for it. I always tell you guys too to negotiate for a better price, a fair price. The only thing that can happen is that a deal does not happen. But I'd rather see a good deal go down instead of a collector having it's a horrible experience. And for me, I've had a few really bad experiences either buying or selling cards where I have a pit in the bottom of my stomach and just a feeling that just you can't shake, and I can't quite describe it, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Gordie Howe obviously had a very long career, and he's got quite a number of cards. This one actually is a really nice card. I enjoy this quite a bit. It's not that expensive, considering who the man was, and he was a very nice guy too. I met him on a couple of occasions and had some decent discussions with him over the years, and I do enjoy this set, as you guys can imagine. I'll probably show a few more cards within this set, but again, this is a great card, and I think you guys would really enjoy it. It is okay. So $400 is expensive. I paid $500 for a 1984 Oldsmobile Shipbox Supreme, but you know, again, that was a crappy car. This is a sports card. So, you know, my car got me from point A to point B, and I talk about my car. I loved that car very much. You know, it only got me to point A to point B, and I think I only purchased that car so I could actually go to card shows. Don't tell anybody that I said that, but I think that's the only reason why I did. And I distinctly remember the car having a baby blue finish. I tried polished it down to the primer, so I looked kind of ridiculous. But anyway, let's go on to the next one. Here's another 1950s Gordie Howe. It's the 1959 Topps Gordie Howe. And this is actually a really nice set. I like the design quite a bit. My problem with this is the grading holder, and it's KSA, which I'm not familiar with. And it may be a Canadian company, I'm not sure. This is the problem that I have with a lot of these grading companies. When grading first came out, there were a lot of dealers and a lot of collectors that didn't understand grading at all, and it took a long time for the grading companies to become established because both collectors and dealers were like, well, what are we going to do with this? How do we price these cards? Why are there two different prices for the same card, you know, raw versus graded cards? And it was kind of like a fad. And you know, 30 years later, grading companies are really kind of well established. I just don't know about this grading company. I don't even know if it's still in business. There are a lot of grading companies that are no longer in business, and a lot of grading companies that collectors will not touch. And I know that there are collectors out there that will only collect a certain grading company, like say PSA, because they're trying to complete a graded set from only one company, which makes sense. But I would actually kind of stay away from this grading company only because I don't know what it is. And again, that's on me because I haven't done my research into this company. So maybe if you guys actually know what this grading company is, you can let me know, and I'd really appreciate that. But this is actually a really nice card and a very nice design, and we'll continue on. Again, here's another KSA of Bobby Hall. Again, very nice card. I wouldn't touch this. Again, unfortunately, like I just said, that I don't know the grading company at all. You know, if this card actually was raw, I would pick it up. And the other thing I do actually is I look at cards through a kind of like a microscope and a jeweler's loupe, and I test the card by smelling the card. And I know that sounds really strange, and a lot of people laugh at me about that. But the reason why you want to kind of do the sniff check with your vintage cards is to make sure that they are vintage and not reprints. And the one thing that I've mentioned on numerous occasions is that a vintage card is going to give off four different scents depending on the amount of decay of the card. Now, all cards will decay over time. That's not to say that your cards are gonna turn into, you know, dirt. That's not the case. But there are certain scents that are going to come about through age. So that's why I do that. If it's encapsulated holder, I can't do that. The other thing too is I like to do is go over the card with a black light, and that's something that I also can't do because the black light is only going to pick up the holder and not the card for the most part. There are some exceptions. And then again, I also have a gram scale as well, which I weigh the cards. And, you know, my fear is one day that I'm going to get busted by the police having a gram scale, a black light, a microscope, and they're going to think that I'm a drug dealer. So that's my biggest fear. Anyway, let's see what else we got. Okay, so 1933 D-Longs. This is a great set. I've actually written quite extensively about this set, and you guys can check it out on my site. Harold DeLong is really kind of notorious for kind of starting up companies and really kind of being the behind the scenes guy for a lot of card issuing companies, including his own, in fact. There's really nothing about his company that exists today except for stock certificates. That happened to have come about when Charlie Conlon, a collector, ended up finding them in a desk drawer, as Hobby Legend goes. And you know about Hobby Legends, right? There's nothing there. The business doesn't exist anymore. The area in which the business was situated in, it doesn't look anything like it did back in 1933, say, when these cards were issued. This is also the same issue that started Lionel Carter's career in writing, and he had a 70-year career as a writer, and he actually goes into a convenience store or a drugstore in Colfax, Illinois, and he finds a couple of packs of these, and it started him off as a collector. It's a great set, great design. I really enjoy it. And the one funny thing about this is you can see this Lou Gehrig here. This photo was taken on the day that he hit 4 home runs, and he hit a fifth home run, except that Al Simmons caught that home run. And I believe Al Simmons is right down here. It's a 1933 Gaudi. And this is a great card too. Al Simmons is really underrated today as a ball player, but he was one of the best hitters of the 1920s and 30s. He has here what looks like to be a 1920s or a late 1920s jersey. The Philadelphia Athletics, and I think between 1926 and 1931, had a elephant on their jersey, which is shown on this card right here. It's a great card, and Al Simmons, you guys can look up his stats. He was just phenomenal too, and he also has a great 1934 Diamond Stars card as well. And then there is a ball player here that I have heard a lot of stories about over the years, and that is the 1933 Gaudi Joe Cronin. And I'm not a fan of Joe Cronin's, however, I do really like this card quite a bit. In 1933, the Washington Senators went to the World Series against the Giants, and they lost. The funny thing was that they had just picked up either Henny Manouche or Goose Goslin, and those two guys were monster hitters, which made the Washington Senators of 1933 just a phenomenal team. Pitching also. Joe Cronin, he's a shortstop even on the Boston Ball Clubs. And Joe Cronin's really kind of notorious for a few things. First, he wrote a report, or he had Billy Evans write a report, kind of dismissing Pee Wee Reese as a very bad ball player. But at the time, Pee Wee Reese was a shortstop in the Boston Red Sox organization. Joe Cronin really kind of thought that Pee Wee Reese was a threat to his position, and he would have ousted him. Now, that's why the Red Sox sold Pee Wee Reese's contract to the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the rest is rock and roll history, as they say. So if that didn't happen, I wonder what would have happened to Jackie Robinson. Trying to connect all the dots here. Joe Cronin, if he didn't like you, you were off the team. And he also is kind of mentioned too in an incident with Jackie Robinson, kind of like trying out for the Red Sox in 1945, and that didn't really go so well. The thing is, the Red Sox at the time, they were forced to have tryouts with several black ball players, Monty Irvin, Hitter Williams, Sam Jethro, and Jackie Robinson, and none of those guys were on the team. I think maybe that had a few of those guys actually been on the Red Sox, you're probably looking at least maybe 5 pennants and maybe a few World Series between, say, 1945 and 1952. The Red Sox really shot themselves in the foot. And they also dismantled most of their team in 1952 as well. By that time, the only established star was Ted Williams, And then I think George Kell came on in 1952, 53 or so for like a year or so. And then I think he may have gone to Baltimore. However, 1950s Red Sox were not good teams at all. And then you have, yeah, so you have Goose Goslin here as well. And you guys can check out Goose Goslin's stats. They are really impressive. I do like this Goose Goslin card quite a bit. I like his 1933 Gaudi. I think it's number 110. It's just a facial shot. And then he's got a really nice 1933 Gaudi, a full body shot too. And I had bought that card. I think it's card number 168. However, it's a really beautiful card. When I got it at auction, some kid was making fun of me. He was like, "Who's that? Oh, great price. I think I paid 75 bucks for it." And his father intervened and said, "Yeah, that's actually a really great price." I always like to educate people on these ball players and stuff, but yeah, he was a young kid and he didn't know who Chris Goslin was, and I was a teenager and I did. But education, to each his own. That's the one thing about the hobby which I really enjoy is that it allows for you to learn about virtually any subject you want. I always try to kind of promote education through sports cards. That's really what my goal is to educate you guys on a lot of the stuff. And hopefully maybe one day someone will say like, "Oh, I remember that guy Ryan. He really helped me out on vintage sports cards, or I learned a lot from him." I'm learning too, by the way. Every time I do an article or I do a video for you guys, I'm always learning new stuff. You should always learn something new every day. And then right above that is very cool 1934 Gaudi, Lou Gehrig. This is a card that I don't really see that often compared to his card number 37, which I really enjoy that card. I wrote a fairly lengthy article on the 1934 Gaudi set, and I'm going to be writing another one specifically on the ball players. Lou Gehrig, obviously, in 1934, I think he got the Triple Crown. Although I could be wrong, it could be Jimmy Fox. I think actually no, I think Jimmy Fox was 1932 and 1933. I know Jimmy Fox had three Triple Crowns, which I think is pretty impressive, or at least three MVPs. This card isn't really seen all that often. It's kind of forgotten about, to tell you the truth. The price on these cards are not forgotten about. And then right next to that, you have a 1934 Gaudi Hank Greenberg. And I just did a video on Hank Greenberg, but just to tell you guys again that Hank Greenberg has four rookie cards, and this is one of them. I do enjoy this card, and I like Hank Greenberg quite a bit. The one thing I didn't mention in that last video with Hank Greenberg was his altercation with Jake Powell, and I will actually talk about Jake Powell specifically in another video because he is in a 1939 play ball set. The 1933 D-Long are a great one-off issue. DeLong himself, he started his own business in 1929. There's a few sources that say 1926, though I highly doubt that. He was Gaudi's treasurer, and then afterwards you have another treasurer, and he sold his stock in Gaudi to finance his business, and then he went to Gum Products Inc. in 1940 when that company first started in Boston, and he may have actually been the one to tell Wellington Mara, the owner of the company, to issue a sports card set. And I also wrote an article specifically on Johnny Mize in that set because that is a very important card within the hobby. Legally, it's a very important card, and if you are a lawyer, you might know that that is probably one of the first legal cases to deal with the right of privacy. And I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about that. You guys can go and read my article. Johnny Mize has two cards in that particular set, and it's just a fascinating story. All right, so if you guys haven't seen this, this is really fantastic. This is a 1912 T207 Bill McKechnie. I'm not sure if it's his rookie card. I want to say that McKechnie has a Colgan's chip, but for all intents and purposes, we'll just call it right now his rookie card until I can establish that his rookie card is in fact this or the Colgan's chip. McKechnie is a really fascinating player and manager. He's actually known more as a manager than anything else. There's a story about McKechnie where he's on the Boston Braves as the manager when in 1935 T205, Emil Fuchs ended up purchasing Babe Ruth's contract and told Babe Ruth that he could be a player manager. Well, the problem was that McKechnie was already the manager of the team, and that he had an 8-year contract with the Braves, which was really unusual at the time. And once that Babe Ruth found out, he went to the press and said, "I was double crossed by Emil Fuchs," and he was furious. And McKechnie was furious too, but he was actually furious at Babe Ruth. These two guys did not like each other, and that's really kind of interesting because everything I've heard from other ball players who played under Bill McKechnie said he was a really easygoing ball player, and he was great to work with. And there are incidences where if McKechnie thought that a ball player was troubled or there was something about the ball player, that he would actually room with that ball player to keep him under control, if you will. The other thing too about McKechnie was that he was notorious for getting lost. He would always end up in a city that he wasn't supposed to be in. He didn't have a sense of direction, if you will. But that's happened to us all, right? I mean, I've ended up in cities where I wasn't supposed to be in either. I was supposed to be in Pittsburgh and I ended up in Indiana. Uh, I guess it happens to people, right? I hope. This is actually a really expensive card. It is technically maybe his rookie, but it's also a short print card in this set. And I'm actually going to be doing a book on this particular set along with the T205 and T206s, and it should be coming out next year. There's a lot about this set which I really enjoy. I love the design, I love the history about it. It's one of my top 3 tobacco sets of all time, along with the T205s, of course, and I have a few of those I want to show you too. And then on top of that, you have a Cycle cigarettes, and there's something very interesting about Cycle cigarettes as a brand. They're almost universally all difficult to find, no matter what card they're on. The one that you might have the easiest time to acquire, if you want to try to acquire a Cycle cigarettes back, is the 1911 T205.